My name is Barbara Wilson and I'm 67 years old. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine my own daughter would try to control my life after Frank passed away. Kristen always had strong opinions, but when she ripped my phone from my hands and smashed it on the floor, something inside me broke too. That moment changed everything between us. Despite my age, I've always valued my independence. Now I had to fight for it. Before I tell you how my own daughter tried to control my life and what I did about it, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself, no matter your age. Frank and I were married for 43 wonderful years before cancer took him from me 18 months ago. We had built a beautiful life together in our two-story colonial in Vermont, raising our daughter Kristen and creating a home filled with memories. When Frank died, I felt like half of myself had disappeared too. The silence in our house was deafening, and simple tasks like taking out the trash or fixing a leaky faucet suddenly seemed overwhelming. During those first few weeks, Kristen was my rock. She'd drive over every other day with groceries, help with household chores, and just sit with me while I cried. At 43, she had her own family, her husband Tom and their two teenagers, Riley and Jason, but she still made time for me. I was grateful for her support and love during those dark days. About 3 months after Frank's funeral, I caught a nasty case of pneumonia. It started with what I thought was just a cold, but within days I was struggling to breathe. Kristen found me when she came for her regular visit and rushed me to the hospital. I ended up staying for 5 days and I'll admit it was frightening. The doctor said I had waited too long to seek treatment, which had made things worse. After that hospital stay, I noticed a shift in Kristen's behavior. Her concern, which had been comforting, took on an edge of control. She started checking my medication daily, asking if I'd eaten, and calling multiple times throughout the day. At first, I appreciated her attentiveness. It came from a place of love, after all. But then things began to change in subtle ways. Kristen started making decisions without consulting me. She rescheduled my doctor's appointments to times when she could take me. She hired a cleaning service without asking if I wanted or needed one. She threw away food in my refrigerator that she deemed too old, including a casserole I had just made the day before. The phone calls increased to 3 or 4 times daily. Mom, did you take your heart medication? Mom, it's going to rain. Don't forget to close your upstairs windows. Mom, are you drinking enough water? Each call made me feel less like her mother, and more like a child who couldn't be trusted to manage basic tasks. Then came the unexpected drop-ins. Kristen would show up unannounced, often when I was in the middle of something, reading a good book, watching my favorite TV show, or just enjoying a quiet cup of tea. She'd immediately start bustling around, fixing things that didn't need fixing, reorganizing cabinets I had organized my way for decades. I began to feel a growing resentment, but I kept it to myself. After all, she meant well, and I didn't want to seem ungrateful for her help. Plus, confrontation had never been my strong suit. Frank had always been the one to address difficult topics in our family. My best friend Judy was the first to notice the change in our dynamic. We've been friends since our teaching days at Burlington High School, where I eventually became principal before retiring. One afternoon, while Kristen was upstairs organizing my closet, which meant discarding clothes she thought were too old or worn, Judy and I sat in the sunroom. Barbara, Judy whispered, leaning in close, don't you think Kristen is being a bit controlling? I glanced toward the stairs, worried Kristen might overhear. She's just concerned about me, I said defensively, especially after that pneumonia scare. Judy raised an eyebrow. There's a difference between concern and control, Barb. You ran a school with 600 students and 50 staff members for 15 years. I think you can manage your own closet. I laughed it off, but Judy's words stayed with me. Still, I made excuses for Kristen's behavior. She had just lost her father. She was worried about losing me too. This was just her way of showing she cared. Things would eventually return to normal, but they didn't. Instead, the controlling behavior escalated, and the subtle boundary crossings became more obvious and more frequent. What I didn't realize then was that this was just the beginning of a painful journey that would test the bounds of our mother-daughter relationship in ways I never could have imagined. My 67th birthday arrived on a beautiful spring day. Kristen insisted on hosting a small celebration at her house, which was fine by me. Frank had always made my birthdays special, and I wasn't sure I was ready to celebrate without him anyway. Better to be surrounded by family than sitting alone at home remembering happier times. The afternoon started pleasantly enough. Kristen had prepared my favorite meal, roast chicken with garlic mashed potatoes, and her kids had made handmade cards that brought tears to my eyes. After dinner, while Kristen was in the kitchen cutting the cake, I walked down the hallway to use the bathroom. As I passed the home office, I overheard Kristen's husband Tom on the phone. "Yeah, we're discussing moving arrangements now," he was saying. "Kristen thinks it would be better to have her mom close by where we can keep an eye on her. The guest house should work perfectly once we convert it." I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding. Moving arrangements? Guest house. This was the first I'd heard of any such plans. I hurried back to the dining room, trying to compose myself before Kristen returned with the cake. Throughout the rest of the evening, I couldn't focus on the celebration. My mind kept returning to Tom's words. Were they planning to move me out of my home without even discussing it with me? When the kids went upstairs to play video games, I decided to confront Kristen directly. "I overheard Tom talking about moving arrangements," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Something about converting your guest house for me?" Kristen's face flushed, but she quickly recovered. "Mom, we've been thinking it might be best if you sold your house. It's too big for just one person, and the stairs could become dangerous for you. Our guest house is sitting empty, and we could make it really comfortable for you." "But I love my home," I protested. "All my memories with your father are there. My garden, my neighbors, everything." "It's for your own good, Mom," Kristen said firmly. "We worry about you all alone in that big house. What if you fell and couldn't reach the phone? What if there was a break-in?" "I've been living in that house for 30 years, I replied, my voice rising. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself and making my own decisions." The drive home was filled with tense silence. Kristen had insisted on driving me, though I would have preferred to take a taxi after our disagreement. As the Vermont countryside flew past the window, I felt a growing sense of unease. This wasn't just about my daughter being overprotective. She was actively trying to take over my life. The following week, Kristen showed up at my door with a real estate agent. "This is Patricia," Kristen announced brightly, as if bringing a stranger to assess my home was perfectly normal. "She's going to give us some ideas about listing your house." I was stunned. "Kristen, I told you I'm not selling my house." The real estate agent looked uncomfortable, caught between mother and daughter. Kristen simply ignored my protest and led Patricia on a tour, pointing out features and flaws, discussing renovations that might help it sell faster. I followed them in shocked silence as they invaded my personal space, talking about my home as if I weren't there. When they reached my beautiful garden, the pride and joy I had cultivated for decades, Kristen waved dismissively. "All this will have to go," she told Patricia. "It's way too much maintenance for someone her age." That was the final straw. I asked Patricia to leave, which she did with an apologetic glance. Kristen was furious. "Mom, you're being completely unreasonable. We're trying to help you." "I never asked for this kind of help," I replied. "And I won't discuss it further." But the incidents continued. Kristen began helping by reorganizing my kitchen cabinets without asking, throwing away perfectly good items she deemed unnecessary. She rearranged my living room furniture to create better pathways, though I'd never had trouble navigating my own home. The worst violation came when I discovered Kristen had found and read my private diary. I'd kept a journal since Frank's diagnosis, writing down my most intimate thoughts and feelings as a way to process my grief. I always kept it in my bedside drawer, but one day I found it on the coffee table, slightly askew, with a bookmark placed in a particularly personal entry about my loneliness. When confronted, Kristen didn't even deny it. "I need to understand what you're going through, Mom. You never tell me how you're really feeling." "Because some feelings are private," I said, trembling with anger and humiliation. "You had no right." "I'm just trying to take care of you," she insisted. "Dad would want me to make sure you're okay." I tried several times to discuss boundaries with Kristen, explaining that while I appreciated her concern, I needed my independence. Each conversation ended the same way, with Kristen dismissing my feelings and insisting she knew what was best for me. "You're being stubborn, Mom," she'd say. "This isn't easy for me either, you know. I'm just trying to do what's right." Her words would sting, leaving me feeling guilty for standing up for myself. Was I being stubborn? Was I making things harder for my daughter who was only trying to help? But deep down I knew this wasn't about help anymore. It was about control. And with each boundary Kristen crossed, my resentment grew, building toward a breaking point that neither of us saw coming. After months of increasing tension with Kristen, I desperately needed a break. Judy had suggested we take a trip to Florida. Just 2 weeks of sunshine, ocean breezes, and no one telling us what to do or where to go. The idea was absolutely perfect. Frank and I had always talked about spending our retirement winters in Florida, but we never got the chance. This would be my first real trip since his passing, and though it made me sad he couldn't join us, I felt he would approve. Judy and I spent hours on the phone discussing our plans. We'd stay at a beachfront condo in Naples, take long walks on the sand, eat fresh seafood, and maybe even try one of those sunset cruises the travel websites raved about. For the first time in months, I felt excited about something. On a sunny Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, researching accommodations on my phone. I'd found several promising options and was comparing prices and amenities, feeling a sense of accomplishment and independence I hadn't experienced in too long. The front door opened without a knock. Kristen had a key, of course, and had long since stopped announcing her arrivals. She walked into the kitchen carrying grocery bags, which she set down heavily on the counter. "Mom, I brought you some of that soup you like from Wagner's Deli and some fresh bread," she said, unloading the items. Then she noticed me quickly setting my phone down. "What are you looking at?" "Just some travel ideas," I said, trying to sound casual. "Judy and I are thinking of taking a trip to Florida next month." Kristen stopped unpacking groceries and turned to face me, her expression a mixture of surprise and disapproval. "Florida? With Judy? Mom, you can't be serious." "Why not? We're both in good health, the weather will be perfect, and we found some reasonable accommodations." "At your age, traveling across the country with no one but Judy is just asking for trouble," Kristen said, her voice rising. "What if something happens? What if you get sick again? Judy can barely manage her arthritis. How is she going to help you in an emergency?" I felt my face flush with indignation. At my age? Kristen, I'm 67, not 97. Judy and I are perfectly capable of managing a simple vacation. We were both working professionals, remember? I ran an entire school for 15 years. That was different, Mom. Dad was alive then. Things are different now. Yes, things are different, I agreed, my voice tightening. I'm a widow now, and I'm trying to build a new life for myself. Part of that includes traveling while I still can. This is exactly why I worry about you, Kristen said, pacing the kitchen now. You're not thinking clearly. You make these impulsive decisions without considering the consequences. Impulsive? I laughed incredulously. Judy and I have been planning this for weeks. We've researched everything thoroughly. There's nothing impulsive about it. Kristen spotted my phone on the table and grabbed it before I could react. She began scrolling through my browser history, her face growing increasingly agitated. Naples, Florida? Do you have any idea how expensive that is? And look at this condo, it's a second-floor unit. What about your knee that bothers you on rainy days? Did you even think about that? I stood up, anger rising in my chest. Give me back my phone, Kristen. She ignored me, continuing to scroll. And these sunset cruises, do you know how dangerous those can be for seniors? People fall overboard, Mom. That's ridiculous, I said, reaching for my phone. Give it back to me right now. What happened next occurred so quickly that it seemed almost dreamlike in retrospect. As I reached for my phone, Kristen jerked her hand away, then suddenly gripped the phone tightly. With emotion that seemed fueled by frustration and something deeper, perhaps fear, she flung it downward. The phone hit my hardwood floor with a sickening crack, pieces of glass skittering across the planks. The kitchen fell silent. I stared at my shattered phone, then at my daughter's face, which had transformed from anger to shock in an instant. But before she could speak, she seemed to steel herself, And the words that came out of her mouth next were spoken with a cold, controlled contempt I had never heard from her before. "You won't need this anymore. I'll decide what's best for you." I felt as if she had slapped me. The room seemed to spin slightly as I gripped the edge of the table for support. This wasn't my little girl speaking. This wasn't the daughter I had raised to be kind and respectful. This was a stranger who saw me not as a person with my own thoughts and feelings, but as a problem to be managed. In that moment, something fundamental shifted between us. A line had been crossed that could not be uncrossed. Kristen seemed to realize what she had done almost immediately. Her face crumpled, and she knelt to pick up the pieces of my shattered phone. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't mean to do that. I just got so worried thinking about you traveling so far away." I couldn't speak. The lump in my throat felt like it might choke me. "We can get you a new phone tomorrow," she continued, desperately trying to backpedal. "A better one, with a bigger screen that's easier to read. I'll pay for it, of course." I finally found my voice. "I think you should go now, Kristen." "Mom, please, let's talk about this." I overreacted, I know, but... "Go," I repeated, my voice stronger now. "I need to be alone." After a few more attempts at apologizing, Kristen finally left, casting worried glances over her shoulder as she went. I locked the door behind her, something I'd never done when she was expected to visit. Alone in my kitchen, I looked down at the broken phone on the counter where Kristen had placed the pieces. It wasn't just a phone that had been shattered. It was my autonomy, my dignity, my very identity as an independent adult. I spent a sleepless night thinking about what had happened and what it meant for my relationship with my daughter. By dawn, I knew what I needed to do. It would be drastic, perhaps even cruel in Kristen's eyes, but I couldn't see any other way to make her understand. Sometimes the only way to teach a painful lesson is through painful means. The drive to Sedona took 3 days. I could have made it faster, but I deliberately took my time, stopping to admire landscapes I'd never seen before. Each mile that passed felt like shedding another layer of the constraints that had been slowly tightening around me in Vermont. When I finally arrived at Meredith's adobe-style home nestled against the red rock formations, I was overcome by the sheer beauty of the place. The sun was setting, painting the famous red rocks in shades of orange and purple that seemed almost otherworldly. Meredith came out to greet me, her silver hair gleaming in the fading light. We hadn't seen each other in person since Frank's funeral, but she embraced me like no time had passed at all. "Welcome to your sanctuary," she said, helping me with my bags. "For as long as you need it." Meredith's guest room had large windows that looked out onto a vista of red rocks and desert plants. That first evening, we sat on her patio with glasses of wine, catching up on the years that had passed since our college days at the University of Vermont. "You know," Meredith said thoughtfully, "when John died 5 years ago, my son Trevor tried to do the same thing, convinced me to sell my home and move in with him and his wife. What did you do?" I asked. "I told him if he brought it up again, I'd sell my house all right, and move to Bali." She laughed. He thought I was joking until I showed him the real estate listings I'd been browsing. Sometimes you have to shock them into seeing you as a person with your own dreams, not just their mother. Meredith's perspective was refreshing. Unlike most people who had offered me advice back home, she didn't automatically side with Kristen's concerns. She understood the fundamental issue wasn't safety, it was respect. The morning after my arrival, I received a call from Dorothy on my new phone. "Kristen has gone into full panic mode," she reported. "She's called everyone you know, filed police reports, even contacted hospitals. When the police did a wellness check and found your note, they told her they couldn't classify you as missing since you left voluntarily. But she's still beside herself." Part of me ached knowing Kristen was so worried, but another part, a stronger part, knew this was necessary. "Has she said anything about why I might have left?" I asked. "Not specifically," Dorothy replied. "She keeps saying you've been confused lately and making concerning decisions. She seems more focused on finding you than understanding why you left." In that moment, I knew I'd made the right decision. Even in my absence, Kristen was still framing the situation in terms of my supposed deficiencies rather than her controlling behavior. Life in Sedona quickly fell into a pleasant rhythm. Each morning, I would wake early to watch the sunrise paint the red rocks. After breakfast with Meredith, I would explore the area, sometimes hiking easy trails, other times browsing the town's art galleries and shops. For the first time in months, I was making my own decisions without justifying them to anyone. I could eat when I wanted, sleep when I wanted, and go where I wanted without fielding multiple check-in calls or unexpected visits. About a week after my arrival, Meredith invited me to join her senior community center's art class. I'd never considered myself artistic. Teaching literature and eventually school administration had been my creative outlets. But with nothing to lose, I decided to try. To my surprise, I discovered I had a natural eye for watercolor painting. The instructor, a retired art teacher named Russell, was particularly encouraging about my landscapes. "You have a good sense of perspective," he told me after my third class. "And you're not afraid of color, which is rare for beginners." Each small compliment, each successful painting, rebuilt something inside me that had been slowly eroding during those months under Kristen's watchful eye, my confidence in my own abilities. The physical aspects of desert living proved beneficial as well. Daily walks strengthened my legs and improved my stamina. The dry air was easier on my occasional joint pain than Vermont's damp climate. I was sleeping better than I had since Frank died, often a full 8 hours without waking. One evening, as Meredith and I sat watching the sunset, she asked, "Have you thought about what you'll say to Kristen when you do decide to contact her?" I sighed. Every day. But I'm still not sure she's ready to hear it, or if I'm ready to say it. "You'll know when the time is right," Meredith assured me. "Until then, you're welcome here." The days stretched into weeks. I continued painting, joined a book club at the local library, and even tried yoga for seniors at Meredith's encouragement. With each new experience, each new connection, I felt more like myself again. Not just Frank's widow or Kristen's mother, but Barbara, a woman with her own interests and capabilities. One breakthrough moment came during a community art show where several of my paintings were displayed. A couple visiting from Texas actually purchased one of my desert landscapes for their vacation home. As they handed me the money, the wife said, "You really captured the spirit of Sedona in this painting. How long have you been an artist?" "About 3 weeks," I replied honestly, and we all laughed. But walking home with Meredith afterward, I realized I was laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in months. Not the polite chuckle I'd managed during visits with Kristen, but genuine, uninhibited laughter. "Frank would be so proud of you," Meredith said, linking her arm through mine. "He always said you were the strongest person he knew." "Did he?" I asked, surprised. Frank had called me many endearing things over our years together, but I didn't recall strong being one of them. "At your 20th college reunion, he told everyone at our table that your quiet strength was what he admired most about you. He said you were like steel wrapped in silk." Tears welled in my eyes at this gift, this memory of Frank I hadn't known I had. And I realized that indeed there was strength in me. I had needed to come all the way to Arizona to rediscover it, but it had been there all along. As my first month in Sedona drew to a close, I knew I wasn't ready to return to Vermont yet. But I was getting closer to being ready to face Kristen and establish new boundaries for our relationship. Boundaries that would honor both her love for me and my need for autonomy. What I didn't know was that the confrontation would come sooner than I expected, and in a way I never could have anticipated. 5 weeks into my stay in Sedona, I was preparing for a small exhibition at the community center where my art class was held. Russell had selected works from several students to display, including 2 of my watercolor landscapes. I was both nervous and excited about having my work shown publicly. The morning of the exhibition, I received an unexpected call from Mr. Callahan, my neighbor back in Vermont. "Barbara," he said, his voice tense, "I thought you should know your daughter was at your house yesterday with a locksmith. She was going through your things." When I asked what she was doing, she said she was securing important documents and that I shouldn't worry. My heart sank. Did she take anything? I couldn't tell from outside, but she carried some papers in small boxes to her car. She looked determined. I thanked him for letting me know and immediately called Judy. "I think she found the spare key to my safe deposit box," I told her. "It was in my desk drawer. I didn't think to take it with me." Judy confirmed my suspicions. "She came to see me yesterday, Barbara. She had your financial statements, information about your retirement accounts. She kept asking if I knew you were spending your savings on some art hobby in Arizona. So Kristen had discovered where I was. And rather than simply calling me or coming to see me, she had chosen to invade my privacy once again. This time by accessing my most personal financial information. I was still processing this when Meredith knocked on my bedroom door. "Barbara? There's something you should see." She handed me her tablet, open to the community center's Facebook page. There, prominently displayed, was an announcement about that evening's exhibition, including a list of featured artists. My name was highlighted in a comment. "Is this the Barbara Wilson from Burlington, Vermont? My mother has been missing for weeks, and this looks like her handwriting on these paintings." My stomach clenched. The signature on my paintings was indeed distinctive. I used my maiden name initial, so they were signed Barbara G. Wilson in my recognizable cursive. "She's coming here," I said to Meredith, my voice surprisingly calm despite my churning emotions. "Kristen must be on her way already if she's seen this." Meredith put her hand on my shoulder. "What do you want to do? We can cancel your participation in the exhibition. You don't have to see her if you're not ready." I considered this for a moment, then shook my head. "No. I think it's time. And maybe it's better this way. In a public place where we'll both need to maintain our composure." "I'll be right beside you," Meredith promised. The exhibition was scheduled to begin at 6 p.m. By 5:30, Meredith and I were at the community center helping to arrange the final details. My paintings were displayed on an easel in a well-lit corner, and I felt a surge of pride seeing them presented so professionally. At precisely 6:10 p.m., as the room was filling with attendees, I saw her. Kristen stood in the doorway scanning the crowd. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and her normally neat hair pulled back haphazardly. When her gaze finally landed on me, her expression cycled rapidly through shock, relief, and anger. She strode across the room, weaving between groups of chatting art enthusiasts. I braced myself for the confrontation, grateful for Meredith's steady presence beside me. "Mom," Kristen said when she reached me, her voice tight with emotion. "Do you have any idea what you've put me through?" Before I could respond, an elderly man approached, admiring the painting displayed next to us. "Is this your work?" he asked me. "The use of light is extraordinary." "Yes, thank you," I replied, watching Kristen's face contort in confusion at this interruption. The man moved on, and Kristen immediately leaned in closer. 5 weeks, Mom. 5 weeks of not knowing if you were alive or dead. How could you do this to me?" I kept my voice low and steady. "I left a note, Kristen. I told you not to worry. A 7-word note. After everything I've done for you. That's all I deserved." People nearby were beginning to notice our tense exchange. Russell approached with a concerned expression. "Everything okay here, Barbara?" "We're fine, thank you," I assured him. Then, turning to Kristen, I added, "This isn't the place for this conversation. The exhibition runs until 8. We can talk afterward." Kristen looked like she wanted to argue, but she glanced around at the crowded room and seemed to think better of it. "Fine. I'll wait." For the next 2 hours, I did my best to focus on the exhibition, explaining my painting techniques to interested visitors, and even receiving a few inquiries about commissions. All the while, I was acutely aware of Kristen watching me from the refreshment table, her expression a mixture of bewilderment and simmering anger. When the exhibition finally wound down, Meredith suggested a nearby cafe for our conversation. "Neutral territory," she whispered to me, "and I'll be at the next table if you need me." The cafe was quiet, with just a few patrons lingering over late evening coffees. Kristen and I sat across from each other in a corner booth, 2 mugs of untouched tea between us. "You look well," Kristen said finally, breaking the silence. "Better than I expected." "What did you expect?" I asked. "That I'd fall apart without your supervision?" She flinched. "That's not fair. I was worried about you. After Dad died, you were so lost, so fragile." "I was grieving," I corrected her. "That doesn't make me incapable. You had pneumonia, Mom. You could have died if I hadn't found you. That was one incident over a year ago. It didn't give you the right to take over my life." Kristen's eyes narrowed. "Is that what you think I was doing? Taking over your life?" I was trying to protect you. By reading my private diary? By bringing realtors to my house without my permission? By destroying my phone when I tried to plan a vacation? My voice remained low, but the intensity behind my words was unmistakable. I apologize for the phone, Kristen said defensively. That was one mistake in months of me trying to help you. Help I never asked for, I pointed out. Help that felt more like control with each passing day. So your solution was to disappear without a word? Do you have any idea what that did to me? To the kids? Riley cried for days thinking something terrible had happened to her grandmother. Guilt twisted in my stomach at the thought of my grandchildren worrying. I'm sorry the children were upset. That wasn't my intention. But Kristen, I needed to show you that I'm still capable of taking care of myself. By running away? That's what teenagers do, Mom, not 67-year-old women. I didn't run away, I said firmly. I removed myself from a situation that had become intolerable. What would you have done if someone was controlling your every move, making decisions for you without your input, treating you like you were incompetent? Kristen started to respond, then stopped, seeming to really consider my question for the first time. I found your safe deposit box key, she said instead. I saw the updated will, the power of attorney documents. You cut me out. I protected myself, I corrected her. The same way you claimed you were protecting me. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our broken trust hanging between us. I was so afraid of losing you, Kristen finally admitted, her voice breaking. After Dad died, I couldn't bear the thought of losing you too. Every little health issue, every time you forgot something or seemed sad, I panicked. I thought if I could just control the environment around you, keep you safe, then nothing bad would happen. For the first time, I saw the fear behind her actions, the terrified daughter, not the controlling tyrant. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it helped me understand it. I'm not going to live forever, Kristen, I said gently. No amount of controlling my life will change that. But while I am here, I need to live my life on my terms. I need your respect more than your protection. Tears filled her eyes. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to stop worrying about you. Worrying is fine, I told her. It's what you do with that worry that matters. You can call to check on me. You can ask if I need help. What you can't do is make decisions for me or undermine the decisions I make for myself. By the time we left the cafe, we had reached a tentative understanding. Kristen would return to Vermont alone, and I would stay in Sedona for a while longer. We would talk regularly by phone, but she would respect my independence and my choices. As we hugged goodbye outside the cafe, Kristen whispered, I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I know, I replied, holding her tight. I'm sorry too. Sorry it took something this dramatic to make us both see what was happening. Watching her drive away toward her hotel, I felt both drained and relieved. The conversation had been painful, but necessary. We had taken the first step toward rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect, rather than fear and control. Later that night, I called Judy to update her on what had happened. Do you think things will really change? She asked skeptically. I don't know, I admitted. But for the first time, I think Kristen actually heard me. And more importantly, I remembered how to make myself heard. 6 months have passed since that night in the Sedona cafe where Kristen and I began the difficult process of redefining our relationship. I've settled into a life I never expected but have come to cherish deeply. After 3 months in Meredith's guest room, I found a small rental casita of my own on the outskirts of Sedona. It's nothing like my Vermont colonial. Just 2 bedrooms, a cozy living area, and a kitchen that opens onto a patio with views of the Red Rocks. But the moment I moved in, it felt like home. My watercolor painting, which began as a casual hobby, has blossomed into something more. I now sell my work in 2 local galleries and teach a beginner's class at the community center once a week. The irony isn't lost on me. At 67, I've discovered a talent I never knew I possessed. My social circle has expanded beyond Meredith to include a diverse group of active seniors. We hike together on weekends, attend lectures at the local college, and gather for potluck dinners where conversation flows easily. These new friends know me only as Barbara, the artist from Vermont, not as Frank's widow or Kristen's mother. There's a freedom in that I hadn't anticipated. As for Kristen, our relationship has undergone its own transformation. True to her word, she's made efforts to respect my independence. Our phone calls, which now happen twice a week by mutual agreement, focus more on sharing our lives than on her monitoring mine. "Mom, guess what Riley did in her science fair?" she'll say, or, "Tom and I are thinking about that trip to Italy next summer. What do you think?" I share my own news too. A painting that sold, a new hiking trail I discovered, the book club discussion that went late into the night. She listens without judgment, without trying to detect problems or risks in my activities. There have been slips, of course. Old habits die hard. When I mentioned a minor cold in April, Kristen immediately wanted to fly out to take care of me. I gently reminded her that I could manage a cold on my own, and to her credit, she backed down. "Sorry," she said. "Still working on the helicopter daughter thing." "And I appreciate that," I told her sincerely. In May, I returned to Vermont for a visit. It was my first time back since my abrupt departure, and I'd worried it might trigger a return to old patterns. But something had shifted fundamentally in our dynamic. Kristen welcomed me into her home for dinner but didn't pressure me to stay there. I spent most of the 2-week visit in my own house, reconnecting with neighbors and old friends. Mr. Callahan joked that my great escape had made me something of a local legend among the retirement community. "You've inspired a revolution," he told me with a wink. Margaret Lewis told her son she'd follow your example if he didn't stop trying to move her into that retirement facility in Burlington. During that visit, I made one of the most significant decisions of my new life. I decided to sell my Vermont home. Not because Kristen wanted me to, but because I was ready to embrace Sedona as my primary residence. The house in Vermont, though filled with beautiful memories, had begun to feel like a museum to my past life rather than a part of my current one. When I told Kristen my decision, I watched her carefully for signs of the old controlling behavior. Instead, she simply asked, "Are you sure this is what you want, Mom?" "I'm sure," I replied. "But I'd like your help with the process if you're willing." Together, we sorted through decades of accumulated possessions. We cried over old photographs, laughed at forgotten treasures, and made thoughtful decisions about what to keep, what to pass on to family members, and what to let go. I purchased a small condominium in Burlington, close enough to Kristen's family that I could visit regularly, but still maintaining my own space. It's my Vermont anchor now, a place to stay during visits without imposing on my daughter or giving up my independence. The Vermont house sold quickly, to a young family with 3 children who fell in love with the garden I'd tended for so many years. Watching them explore the house during the final walkthrough, the youngest child racing up the stairs I'd once worried were too dangerous for me, I felt a sense of rightness. The house would be filled with life and new memories. Back in Sedona now, reflecting on the journey of the past year, I'm struck by how a moment of crisis, my daughter ripping my phone from my hands, ultimately led to profound growth for both of us. For Kristen, it was a painful but necessary awakening to the damage her controlling behavior was causing. She's told me that in the weeks after I disappeared, she sought help from a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. "I needed to understand why I was so afraid of letting you make your own choices," she explained. "It wasn't really about you at all. It was about my fear of loss, my need for control." For me, the journey has been equally transformative. I rediscovered my capability, my independence, and my courage. I learned that setting boundaries, even when painful, is sometimes the most loving thing you can do in a relationship. And I found that at 67, I could still reinvent myself, still discover new passions and purposes. Frank would be proud of both of us, I think. Proud of Kristen for having the humility to recognize her mistakes and work to change them. Proud of me for refusing to be diminished by grief or age or someone else's fears. The most valuable lesson I've learned through all of this is that dignity in aging doesn't come from being protected or sheltered. It comes from being respected by others and by yourself. It comes from making your own choices, taking your own risks, and yes, sometimes making your own mistakes. Parent-child relationships are complicated at any age, but perhaps never more so than when traditional roles begin to reverse. The key I've found is to resist that reversal, to maintain the mutual respect that allows both parent and child to remain fully themselves, fully adult, fully dignified in their own right. If you're watching this and facing similar challenges with your aging parents or adult children, I hope my story offers some insight. Remember that love expressed through respect will always be more powerful than love expressed through control. And it's never too late to change the dynamics of a relationship that isn't working. What about you? Have you experienced similar tensions in your family? How did you handle them? Share your stories in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more perspectives on navigating life's complex relationships at any age. I'd especially love to hear from both sides. Adult children concerned about their parents, and older adults working to maintain their independence. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the most important freedom is the freedom to be yourself no matter your age.